Good morning or good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is John Richardson speaking with you from Toronto, Canada. Today is Wednesday, July the 21st, 2021. And this is one more of my ongoing series of podcasts for the American Expat Financial News Journal. And for those who subscribe to it, and if you don't, you should go to AmericanExpatFinance.com. You will see that the most recent article was talking about the COVID-19 vaccination issue for Americans living in Thailand. And this is going to be an interesting discussion today. This impacts Americans all around the world to greater or lesser degrees, but today we are going to focus on Thailand. And I am pleased to introduce my guest to you today, Joseph Noble, who is an American citizen living in Thailand. And we will quickly learn how he arrived in Thailand and how he got involved in this very interesting and important issue. Welcome, Joe. Thank you so much for discussing this with me today.
Thank you, John. Pleasure to be here.
Well, let's begin just so that listeners can get some context. So where are you from in the USA, and how did you get yourself to Thailand, and how long you've been there and all that stuff?
Well, originally I grew up in Kentucky, and I worked in California for 20 years, and then I ended up in Alabama in the high-tech industry, and ultimately have resided in Florida for like the last 25 years. But I moved to Thailand. Actually, I moved to Asia when a California high-tech company I worked for wanted me to come over and set up sales in Asia of their products in 2003, and I pretty much stayed here since then.
So that's, my God, that's 18 years at this point. So I guess if I were to use the phrase American abroad, you would consider yourself definitely to be an American abroad. And my sense is that it's probably permanent for you.
Nothing's ever permanent in life. Like I say, I still have my house in Florida, and I try to go back every year. I haven't for the last 2 or 3 years, and who knows? I might be moving back any day.
Okay, so any day sounds like a good trigger for the topic of today. We've had to deal with this COVID-19 thing worldwide now for what's it been, about 16 months. And the situation in Thailand, I understand, has been up and down. What I'm reading in the papers is that the COVID situation in Thailand is not great at the moment. Is that your experience?
And it's been more like 18 months because it started in January here, and the Thai government reacted extremely quickly and closed down their borders and closed down pretty much everything. And all of last year they had statistically like almost zero in terms of COVID infections. Of course they had some, but it was, like I say, statistically low. And then about May of this year, late April, May, it kicked off, and they're up to about over 10,000 infections a day, and over 100 people dying a day now. So it's
okay. So maybe
it's rising. So
yeah, so maybe we can put that in context. So Thailand has a population of did you say 70
million? Yes.
So 10,000 a day. If the U.S. would have 350 million, that would be the equivalent to about 50,000 a day in the U.S. Is that,
yes,
is my arithmetic
that's
correct?
about right. Yes.
All right. So that is really, really significant, I think. And then if we add to the fact that we have that huge city of Bangkok with, what's the population of Bangkok?
I actually don't know. It's kind of what they would consider a megalopolis. It's the main
It's a
city in
huge
Thailand, and
city anyway. It's a huge city.
I'd say it's approaching 20 million, and if you add all the suburbs and stuff like that. But
Oh
I
my
don't
God.
know for sure.
So, I mean, that's precisely the sort of environment where it's harder to control this type of thing, I guess, isn't it?
It's an urban environment, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So I read the article in American Expat Finance, which was consistent with things I've been reading for the last while. And my understanding is that it is very, very difficult to get these vaccines in Thailand generally, but
Yes.
specifically for American citizens. Have I got that right?
Yeah, understandably, with whatever vaccines the Thai government can get, they are allocating them to their citizens first, and we are, uh, we're kind of the last ones in the line. It doesn't matter what risk or age group we're in.
Well,
We're
I don't think that any country has an obligation to vaccinate people who are not its citizens. But my understanding is there are countries that are vaccinating its expats in Thailand. Is that correct?
Yes, actually, because of the lack of vaccines here, the French and the Belgian ambassadors went to the health minister and were trying to get some priority for their citizens. And he said, "Well, why don't you vaccinate your own people?" And he said, "You don't have to do it at the embassies. You can do it through the private hospitals." And they took him up on it. And uh, France is now vaccinated. Their first tranche was to people over 55 years old. Now there's all of their people over old, and they're going with the Johnson, which is so fairly quickly and seem, and none of the ties uh, to object to it. They their favor, and the average citizen, you know, think, well, they're for own people. That's good.
So basically, if one has a French passport in Thailand, one has access to the vaccine.
And matter of fact, there were hospitals, one here on the island where I live, and it has 8 hospitals throughout the country, which is a pretty large country. But people can get to one of French people can get to hospitals, and they just go done. The French government pays the vaccines.
Yes. Well, that's
It can be
very, very interesting. And
done.
you say Belgium, citizens of Belgium have the same privileges?
I don't know what Belgium was able to work out, but I can say this: there's a lot. I think there's a lot. I don't statistically have the numbers, but just from my day-to-day travels, it seems like there's a lot more French in Thailand than there are Americans. So
Well, that's
they
interesting.
come here in droves and retire.
Well, what's significant is that the government, the French government, recognizes this and is taking steps to provide this service to its expats. Now,
Exactly.
the United States, I understand, has categorically refused to
That's true.
supply.
That is exactly true. Yeah.
All right. Now, I know you've been very active in learning about this and trying to get this changed. So, uh, what would you like to tell us about the position of the American government, the advocacy that you've done in that regard, et cetera? Let's begin with the position of the U.S. government on this issue.
The position, as stated by all of the embassies, whether it's the U.S. Embassy in Thailand or the U.S. Embassy in Mongolia or the U.S. Embassy anywhere, is that uh, that the American government does not provide medical care for its citizens in the host countries, uh, and which is what they've always been their position. We consider this different. This is a pandemic, and um, but the alternative, they're basically saying because they don't provide medical care, they're not going to provide vaccines.
Okay. Let
So
me just
yeah,
pause you there
mhm,
for a second, because it was interesting to me. You said you consider this to be a little bit different because it's a pandemic. So would it be fair to say what they're defining as medical care, you're defining as an emergency situation? Would that be accurate?
yeah, it's like the difference between going to a hospital for a broken arm and having the health department declare a pandemic in your neighborhood or in your state or in your city.
Yeah.
This is
So I
a
mean,
health issue. It's not a. It's. Mhm.
medical care would presumably be I'm sick today or I have a broken arm. That would be an
Yeah.
individual, you know, thing, right? A circumstantial thing. But this is not.
Right.
This
Right.
is an external phenomenon, right? A pandemic that's affecting the country, everybody in it. So, I have a lot of trouble seeing that as you're asking for medical care.
Well, think about the United States, for instance. They don't normally provide vaccines free of charge to uh, to every citizen of the United States for measles, mumps, and rubella, for instance. You have to go to your doctor and get it. But here they're doing it for everybody in the United States, 2 shots.
So they sure
That's
they
all we're
surely
that's all we're asking for. Is the same thing. We pay our taxes. We vote. I you say I've been over here, but I watch CNN and ABC News every day. Uh, you know, I'm an American citizen. I
well, you
just happen to
clearly
be
are an
living here.
American citizen. It's interesting to me. You said that you pay your taxes, and the French expats living in Thailand, they don't pay taxes to the French government, do they?
No, they don't have any tax on money earned in other countries.
But American citizens, have the
Do
citizenship taxation regime. So you're filing a tax return every year and paying whatever you
yeah,
owe.
yeah. I'm also I'm filing my tax return and I'm filing a lot of other different forms that the American government requires.
But yet, although you're good enough to tax and they require you to comply with all these obligations, you're somehow not good enough to receive the benefits of where your tax dollars go.
No, as a matter of fact, the other alternative they give to us, since they're not providing us with medical care, is, and this is their two pet responses, is wait for the local government to give you your vaccine, and we will keep you informed of what the local government's doing, or two, fly home to the United States and get your vaccine there, which is almost impossible for most people because it costs like probably 2 months and $10,000 to get 2 shots. Because if you go back to the United States and then try to return to Thailand, if you can get in, you're going to have to be in quarantine for 2 weeks and pay the hotels and the government to be in quarantine, even if you've had 2 vaccinations
Jeez.
with FDA approved vaccines. So they take it a lot more seriously in Asia in terms of quarantining. So getting back to your original question of what the embassy requires, they say wait for the local government, which is or go home, and both of them are not working out.
In other words, we're not going to help you. You're on your own.
Exactly.
Do you think the fact that you are required to pay taxes in the United States is relevant in this discussion?
Well, if I mean, yeah, there's a contract, between a citizen and their government that they're supposed to take care of their people regardless. And if you look at the definition of what is an embassy, Just Google it, and it'll, the first thing that pops up is the American embassy says it's there to help and aid its citizens who are living or traveling to other countries, and that's just not something they're doing. And we're the only country that pays taxes, yet France, as an example, is taking care of its people in not only Thailand, but I think other countries. I'd have to look up on that. China is vaccinating its people here in Thailand. Are they being taxed? No. The United States is the only country other than Etria that requires taxation on foreign earned income. So yeah, it's pertinent.
Well, it really seems to me that for the U.S. government to say, well, by God, yes, you should be paying taxes to the U.S. government, but no way we're going to provide you with the same services that we provide to Americans inside the United States. It's almost like they're trying to suck and blow at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, these ideas just seem to me to be completely incompatible.
Well, I've approached the State Department from 20 different angles. I even got in touch with the doctor at the State Department or his office. That the State Department actually distributed the Pfizer and the Moderna shots out to every one of its embassies throughout the world, and all of the employees in the embassies. And most of these employees are not even U.S. citizens, by the way. And they got it out to every embassy throughout the world, the Pfizer or the Moderna shots. So they were able to do it for those people. Also, I understand the military's gotten a lot of people, a lot of these shots out around the world, hundreds of thousands. And there's even in Guam, which is pretty close, at like just a couple hours from Japan. It's a U.S. territory. You can get the Pfizer or Moderna there, but you can't get it here. I don't know why well, I do know why they're not sending it out to us. There's a very clear-cut reason that the Biden administration is saying they're not sending it to us.
Do you mean generally or to Thailand?
Generally.
I see. Do you think that if we were to agree for the sake of discussion,
Yeah.
actually, we don't even need to, let's assume we're dealing with not Thailand, but another country. Let's say you're dealing with a country that has a very low vaccination rate and a rapidly growing COVID problem. Do you think there's any merit to the argument that, hey, at least for those countries with this going on, that the U.S. government should have a heightened obligation to take care of its citizens?
I think it
I mean, let's
has an
compare
equal
Canada.
Yeah, of course it does. Of course it does. If its job is to protect the health of its citizens, then yes, it has a heightened obligation to take care of its citizens in places where it's running more rampant.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a
should
huge difference between, let's say Thailand, okay, and let's say Canada. Where, say Canada. Well, I know in Canada that anybody who lives there can get these shots. All right, but I mean that.
What about Mexico?
That's
What
very
about
different?
How about Mexico? I mean, I think there's a lot of U.S. citizens living in Mexico. So
there are, and I don't know anything about the situation there. But I mean, this is essentially a blanket decision. That because
here's their decision. Their decision is very clear cut, because China gave vaccines out with conditions saying, if we give you vaccines, we want you to vaccinate our people in your country. Then the U.S. has taken the position that, okay, if you're going to do that, we're going to give out vaccines and we're not going to have any strings attached. You'll see that in all the articles. Well, it so happens.
In other words, they're trying to sort of one up them on the moral issue.
Exactly. But the moral issue is, we're the strings that, the expats that live, or the Americans that happen to be living in other countries, happen to be the strings attached. Now,
Yes.
our position is, or my position at least, is, hey, you got all these extra vaccines, please distribute them to the countries that can't get these vaccines, that can't afford it. Yeah, I'm all for that. All I'm saying is, can you send some extras for the Americans living over here? And don't cut back on the vaccines you're sending to them. Just send us some. There's not that many of us. Just get us
Well,
the vaccines. Get us
you
the
could say
FDA
there's not that
vaccines.
many, but there's enough so
Mhm.
that, they can be counted up for sure. I mean, how many American citizens do you think live in Thailand?
You know,
Well,
that's a
it's in the
question that
thousands anyway.
that's a question that the State Department can't answer
It's in the
because they don't
thousands
keep track
anyway,
of it.
right?
Yeah, my guesstimate is probably 30 to 40,000, but the State Department doesn't keep track of Americans overseas, except they seem to know where you are when taxes come. So,
And these these Americans who live in Thailand, and this is just an impression I have, a completely uninformed impression, but I think a lot of them are retired people, aren't they? Who moved to
yeah,
Thailand for lower living
the
costs?
majority are retired, like myself. We move here because it's a beautiful, it's Florida like, uh, uh, temperate weather. Their health, you know, their here are amazing. In the States, honestly, reasonably priced, which is, geez, we can't take advantage of Medicare all of our lives and even file any amendments. But yeah, our retirees, or it's teachers. It's not the fat cat that he thinks about people living overseas.
Well,
These are just average people that
it's
said,
people
"Hey,
largely
mhm,
who paid taxes living in the United States the majority of their lives, right?
exactly, exactly,"
So they paid all
and
these
that's true.
taxes.
That's true in Thailand. That's true in Costa Rica. That's true in, you know, literally. There's millions of retired people living outside the United States, and they're not getting vaccines, even though Biden said that all Americans should get vaccines, FDA approved vaccines.
Does that mean that the Biden administration is of the view that Americans who live outside the country are not Americans?
You'd have to ask them that question. All I'm saying is we're asking for the vaccines, and
Well, that would be
they're
the
telling us,
logical inference, wouldn't it?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
See, I guess what I'm as I think this through here, listening to you, the point is that we're dealing with very significant numbers. It's not like getting a vaccine to one or two people somewhere, right? I mean, there
No,
are these
no.
people are in the tens of thousands.
Theoretically, around the world, I have heard, and again, the State Department doesn't have numbers to back this up, but they're saying between 5 to 9 million people live outside of the American citizens live outside of the United States, and I happen to be like a 10th generation American. I'm not like, I I just happen to be living here. It's not. Uh, uh, I don't have any other ties. I just chose this place to live because it was nice.
You're not
Um,
a dual citizen.
no,
You're an American
absolutely.
only.
No, my forebears fought in the Revolutionary War and the Civil War and World War I and World War II. So I mean, uh, yeah, we go back a ways to the United States. So I'm not a recent citizen.
Well, but
Mhm.
what's interesting is that what it means is that you're an American who doesn't have ties to any other country. I mean, am I right on that?
Right.
Which I think would make the argument for providing the vaccine to you far more compelling. I mean, they can't just say, well, you're a citizen, you're also a
He's a
citizen of
dual
this and that.
citizen. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I know that. I thought of that, but if you're a citizen, you're a citizen. That's the
No,
way it's
oh, no
supposed to work.
question about that. And I think
Yeah.
that I think that it's interesting. I mean, as I let as I there's a great discussion. I thank you for it. It's helping me clarify what I think the issues are here.
Mhm, mhm.
But so we start off with a question of does a country have an obligation to its citizens outside the country? Um, Maybe yes, maybe no. Clearly, some countries are stepping up to the plate: China, France, etc. The U.S. apparently is not. Then, perhaps we ask the question: well, what if those citizens living outside the country are required to pay taxes to the country on their worldwide income? Does that make the argument more compelling for access to services outside the U.S.? And I think it does. Personally, and that is also your view. You think it does? The fact of paying
Absolutely.
taxes? Yeah, I
Of
think it
course.
does.
Of course.
And then we move to the next question. So, the U.S., to its credit, is shipping vaccines in large quantities to other countries. Doesn't They clearly have shown they have the logistical capabilities to do that. Then why not ship those vaccines for their own citizens as
Yep.
well?
They've got 1.5 million doses of Pfizer that are coming into Thailand by the end of this month, but none of them have been allocated for American citizens. They're basically, again, no strings attached. They're giving them to the Thai government, and no Americans are going to get any of those that we're aware of. At least there's been no commitment. The South Korean government got an army. We sent FDA approves to them. We've committed to doing 80 million, I think, throughout the world. And that's not even facts. The contributing dollars to COVAX shots out around the world that that can't afford their own. There's providing a lot for other people, but providing it for who are living overseas.
Well, that just seems to me to be plain wrong. I mean, it just seems to me completely immoral. This also, though, is an issue that my impression has crossed party lines and is uniting, as is so rarely happens, uniting Democrats and Republicans. Have I got that right?
Yeah, we did there's a course that was, and were sent to the secretary, and they were Democrats and Republicans overseas groups, joined, and their letter that generated the U.S. 2 weeks ago that was 66 senators sent to Secretary Blinken, State Blinken. You need to get to these Americans overseas. So, and it was a bipartisan. Only 26 out of 100 signed, but they did it the day before they were going to recess for a couple of weeks. So I'm sure more would have signed it if they had more time.
I think that's huge.
So it is a bipartisan issue.
I think 26 out of 100 is huge, regardless of the circumstances. But the fact that it's a bipartisan thing makes it even more extraordinary. And even with that, even with the requests coming from 26 senators, no indication the Biden administration is going to change course on this.
There's been no response, so it sure looks like they're not changing course on it yet. Like I say, me and about these 8 other people have been working pretty much like 6 months constantly, 4 or 5 hours a day. We've gotten 20 articles published in various newspapers and publications, and we put pressure on many different places, but the Biden administration is just not responding. I'm surprised the Republicans haven't taken it up as an issue. You know, but such is politics, it seems. I don't know why people don't pay attention to Americans overseas.
Well, it's a big problem. It's, and this vaccination thing is, is one instance, one example of, a general disregard. And I think actually I would go further and call it a sort of contempt, callous disregard for Americans overseas.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely. I think they think everybody's a fat cat, with a motorized yacht, avoiding taxes, but that's not the case at all.
my
It's just,
impression is that a
yeah,
large percentage of Americans living overseas do so because they can't afford to live in the United States, in
yeah,
retirement, and their money goes a lot further. I mean,
it does go a lot further.
yeah. So, I mean, in a sense, they're doing the country a service by, finding a way to fend for themselves, rather than,
Yeah.
find a way to live off general tax revenues or something.
And they're certainly not burdening the health sector either,
That's
because
correct. Yeah, I
they
know.
don't get any coverage. They don't get any coverage. So yeah,
So why do you
we're cheap
think?
citizens. We're
Yeah,
cheap citizens, man.
well, that's right. That's right. I mean, they're far less costly to the government than, than those who are resident in the United States. Um, I
Yeah.
saw an article. Maybe it came from your group. I think it was in the Washington Post a few weeks ago on this.
Mhm.
And what shocked me were the comments. All these people saying, well, what do you expect if you don't want to live in the United States? Your choice, you bear the risk, et cetera, et cetera. Who gives a damn if you pay taxes? Why do you think there is I mean, it's one thing for the government to behave this way, but just the general comments in these articles, presumably from the general public. I mean, why do they say these things?
Well, because I don't know what the percentage of people who have passports in the United States is, but it's pretty low. And you know, without bashing, I just say it's a colloquial attitude, because most people in the United States don't travel outside of the United States. But I traveled outside of the United States and lived out as a country to sell our product. I didn't, you know, by my company to sell American products. I people, my house was broke back in destroyed. The insurance gave me coverage to live there, and I have now with some lot of vacation houses all over and same problem. Uh, you know, it's okay in places. It's so, but in the United States, insurance companies and the police, for instance, my house we ransacked and destroyed was, well, you weren't. So expected a lot.
God.
So it's attempt for people to live in the States. I don't know why.
So I'm intrigued by your yeah, I don't know why either. I mean, it's one of the great mysteries of life. I'm intrigued by your statement that you've got like 8 people or so, working on this issue pretty much full
Mhm.
time. I mean, that's damned impressive. Um, who are these? Are these political people? Are they part of political parties? Are these volunteers? Or what kind of people are they?
Oh, these are volunteers, and they basically Democrats abroad. It's a very active chat in Thailand. Like I say, independent actually with them. They had set up this committee and were successfully getting these articles placed, which I would never have been able to do. Throughout newspapers and publications. Uh, you know, so yeah, it's 8 people that are volunteering 4 or 5 hours a day for the last 6 months, and it's all basically to get vaccines for Americans overseas. Um, you know, nothing personal there.
Yeah, no, that is very, very impressive that, you've been able to do this. I don't think people have been able to mobilize Americans to that degree on the tax issue, which is, of course, another big irritant.
Yeah. Well, let's put it this way. Once America's basically vaccinated, so although they're finding out now recently that a large portion of them aren't, and it's going to increase as this Delta variant catches hold, just like it has in Asia here. But they're basically finding out that that it's an important issue. Kind of lost my train of thought there.
It's a huge issue. I mean, it's a huge issue in terms of what it actually is, the lack of the vaccine, but it's a huge issue in terms of, what does it mean to be an American citizen? It's a
Exactly.
huge issue in terms of, are you kidding me? We're required to pay taxes, but you're not giving us the same services the people in the United States get. It's a huge issue in terms of definition. I don't see this as medical care at all.
No, it's health.
The medical care strikes me as something personalized. I personally had a slip and fall. This is, an environmental thing. And so I don't personally see it as medical care.
Well, the whole world is seeing it as that, and so is the United States, except for their citizens outside of the United States. Although I will say this, there's a lot of governments that are reacting the same way as the United States in not vaccinating their people overseas. But I expected more of the United States. And quite frankly, so do a lot of these host countries. Yeah. They expected the United States would be the first in line to take care of their own people.
Right. Well,
and the locals don't mind. The locals don't mind. That's one thing. Everybody goes, oh, well, people object to the Americans getting these shots ahead of. They didn't mind that the French got shots. They thought, wow, look at the French government. It's doing a good thing, for its people. They didn't complain.
Why would anybody mind? I mean, isn't the general assumption the more people who are vaccinated, the better it is for everybody?
Yeah, theoretically.
Theoretically, yeah.
I mean, that's what you would expect people to think.
Well, yeah, of course. But the one thing that a crisis always demonstrates is how different people really are in terms of, in terms of how they see a lot of these things.
Don't get me started on Americans who aren't getting vaccinated now, because, we're faced with spending $10,000 and 6 weeks to get 2 shots, and people there are turning it down. It's crazy. So,
well, my impression of what happened there was that the percentage of people vaccinated went up quite rapidly and then sort of hit a wall when a lot of people just refused, I guess, to be vaccinated. Is that accurate?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I don't know if one can believe statistics on this stuff or not. I don't know what to believe about any of this, frankly. Okay, but what I read yesterday is that the rate of vaccination in Canada is now higher than the United States. I don't know whatever that means, but whatever's going on, it is a major, major problem. And it does seem to me that every individual in his or her own way needs to do what they can to, improve the situation.
Well, whatever is going to be done for the United States needs to be done now, because this Delta variant, and who knows, maybe the Epsilon, variant is right around the corner for circulating in the unvaccinated people. But it's not something to sneeze at. It's coming, and it's big. And I've heard, public, doctors in the United States saying, if you're not vaccinated now, you're going to get the Delta variant. Well, a lot of Americans aren't vaccinated over here, so the Delta variant has arrived. So, if this is something's going to be done, it needs to be done now. It needs to be, not in October. They're saying we might get Moderna or Pfizer and have to pay for it, at the hospitals here. But that's not till like October or January of next year. October of this year or to January of next year.
Yeah, it's
And,
absolutely
and,
crazy. It's crazy.
and in the United States, you can get it across the street at the CVS store. So
That apparently is
so
true. I mean, I think that, I mean, one of the, I
I
don't
know
know,
it's true.
on a larger,
Hmm.
larger scale, this sort of shows you, the difference between the wealthier countries and the poorest countries of the world. So some of the poorest countries in the world, the vaccination rate is almost insignificant. And I sit here in downtown Toronto, Canada, where you can walk across the street and get a vaccine.
Hmm.
So
Sometimes it doesn't have to do with just the money of the country, though. They've politicized it and it's become a pride issue. So
yeah,
there's
no
a lot of
question
reasons.
about that. No
Hmm.
question. Well, this has been a really, really interesting conversation. I thank you for it. You've really helped me shape my own thinking on this, which has been great. Um, what would you like to add, sort of coming to an end here? A message or short messages or?
Well, what I would like to say is that the United States needs to decouple giving Americans overseas shots from giving shots out to other countries. They need to treat it as two separate issues. Go ahead and give those shots to those other countries, but just send a few extra for the Americans who are living overseas. They're not contrary issues. We're not strings
Absolutely not.
attached.
And if they're
You know,
worried about the China thing, I mean, it's different from what China did. If they're saying, well, sure, we're giving you these vaccines unconditionally, and then turning around to Americans abroad and say, and we're giving Americans abroad vaccines unconditionally.
which
They're
is
two,
what
they're two separate
which is
issues.
what France exactly what France did. If they would just follow the France model, they can deal. They've got the money to get the vaccines over. We know they can get them over. They can then contract with the local hospitals, that have multiple branches in any country, and they can take all these employees that they got at the embassies, and they can you know have them schedule. They can set up a website and they can schedule these, or have people walk in with their passports and get shots at the local hospitals. They don't need to go through all the website, even just you
Joe,
know
it really seems to me that if America can put a man on the moon, America can figure out how to get vaccines to Americans in Thailand, wouldn't you think?
you would think so. Yeah, I mean, this is a type of project that Americans are good at, is big impossible projects, but this one's simple.
Maybe that's why they
I
don't want
mean,
to take it on. It's too simple. Maybe your message should be something
all
like
they got to
this.
do is ship them over to
Every American citizen abroad lives somewhere in the jungle, and it's almost impossible to find. Your
That's
challenge.
not true.
I know it's not true, but maybe that's what you tell them. Okay. Your
If they
challenge,
if they were shots to these, go ahead.
your challenge to find every one of those unfindable Americans and vaccinate them before it's too late. Maybe it should be pitched that way. Maybe it's just too easy for them to do it. I don't know. But it is a big problem.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
You know
could
what?
solve it.
I would be, yeah. I mean, I would be grateful if you had just sort of put me on your mailing
All right,
list.
I got one other pitch. You know, there's 9 million Americans living outside of the United States. How many states are there with 9 million people? And the answer, I already know, is there's only 11 states that have more than 9 million people. You know, Yet we're being taxed without representation. Remember what the Tea Party was about in Boston, taxation without representation. You know, if they're talking about getting a 51st state, maybe the 51st state should be something like the expat state, because that's the only way we're ever going to get, if we had 2 senators and we had like 20 representatives, I don't know what the ratio is for representatives. This wouldn't be an issue. We'd be the deciding vote on many of these things, but we have no representation for anybody that lives outside of the United States. None. France, on the other hand, does. France has voting people within their parliament, or I don't know what exactly their form of government is, the legislature. They actually have people within the legislature that are voting for people, French residents who live outside of France. So the bottom line is, they're ever going to do a 51st state, we would be the 11th or 12th largest state. Certainly a lot bigger than Wyoming or Montana or Delaware.
No question about it. No question about it. Last week, I was in a conversation with somebody who put it rather well. What he said is he'd done some arithmetic, and he said that basically there's one member in Congress for about every 750,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And if that were the case by his arithmetic, he said that Americans abroad should have 10 members of Congress.
And 2 senators.
And 2 senators,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't think that the United States does a very good job of considering Americans abroad, but it of course becomes far more difficult when there's not a single legislator who has the interests of Americans abroad at heart.
It's impossible. It's impossible. It's impossible.
It is. It is very difficult problem. And, maybe the silver lining of this vaccine problem is that it really, it illuminates this as a much larger issue.
Mm-hmm. I hope so.
For the moment, the key is to get them to reverse their policy and get those vaccines to people in Thailand and other parts of the world.
Just follow the French model. That's all I'm asking.
Follow the French.
And do it now.
Would that play well in Congress? Follow the French? I don't know.
Well, I'm just saying use their model because they've already worked.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I understand.
Yeah. Just remember the French helped us. The French helped us in the Revolutionary War. Okay, they're friends.
They did. Absolutely. The thing is that the truth is, this is so easy to do that, their refusal is willful, deliberate, malicious, and there's no other way to describe it, I think.
Yeah. They've turned it into a political softball, and it doesn't need to be.
Well, all of these things are going to add up. They're going to add up. And sooner or later, there's going to be a reaction to this. I don't know what it will be, but there will be a reaction. I mean, this is just so wrong on so many levels. It's just so wrong. Anyway, so as we sort of come to an end here, I want to thank you very much. This has been a really, really good discussion. As I say, it's helped me sort of frame my own views on this. So I thank you very much for it.
Very welcome.
Keep me on your mailing list whenever you have these articles going out. And I'd love to pick this up with you down the road. And thank you. Thank you very much.
No problem.
On behalf of all people abroad for the great work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And if somebody wanted to help you volunteer or anything, how might they get a hold of you?
All right, I didn't have that email for Democrats Abroad available, but go to
Democrats Abroad. Well, if they were to Google
Thailand.
Democrats Abroad Task Force COVID-19 or something, would they find you?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, or Democrats Abroad Thailand. Yes.
Okay, absolutely. Sure. Okay, so Democrats Abroad Thailand, whatever. Okay, well, that is great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.